Huawei Mate 50 Pro camera test. Peace be upon you, my dear friends and followers of the channel. How are you today? I hope you are well and in good health. Today with you is a beautiful, new and important video for everyone. This video will be called the Huawei Mate 50 Pro camera test. But before watching the video, subscribe to the channel and like and share so that it reaches the largest number of people. Now let's watch the video and I hope you like it. We put the Huawei Mate 50 Pro through a battery of rigorous XmarK camera tests to measure its performance in photo and video quality and zoom from an end user perspective. In this video I will explain the device's performance in a variety of tests and several common use cases and aim to highlight the most important results of our testing. Through a snippet of captured data. Overview. Main camera specifications. Primary camera, 50MP sensor, 24mm equivalent lens with adjustable aperture f/1.48 f/4.0, optical image stabilizer, OIS, ultra-wide camera, 13MP sensor, 13mm f/2.2 equivalent lens telephoto camera, 64MP. 90mm f/3.5 equivalent lens, optical image stabilizer, OIS, pros wide dynamic range in both photos and video, high level of image detail, very well controlled noise in images, extended depth of field in group photos in bright lighting conditions, detail is well preserved across all zoom ranges, nice simulated bokeh effect, autofocus is generally fast and accurate in photos and video, nice colors in bright lighting conditions, residual motion is well controlled in video mode, cons slight white balance shift is sometimes visible, differences between preview and capture which are often visible in difficult scenes, capture is a little slow sometimes in difficult scenes, differences in sharpness between frames are often visible in the video with a XmarK camera score of 149. The Huawei Mate 50 Pro is the new number 1 in our smartphone camera ranking. It also achieved our best image result to date, thanks to excellent results in the exposure, focus, and texture, noise categories. The autofocus result greatly benefits from the innovative new adjustable aperture, which allows for improved depth of field in the scene. The adjustable aperture is especially useful, for example, in group photos. As smartphone image sensors have become larger, the effect has been a decreased depth of field, making it difficult to keep all objects in focus if they are not at the same level of focus. Huawei's system uses a built-in diaphragm that allows for adjustment from f/1.4 to f/4.0, so, depending on the scene, the camera can either prioritize light capture, in low light, maximize depth of field, or choose a setting that's more balanced between the two extremes. We last saw a similar feature on the dual aperture Samsung Galaxy Note 10 series, but it's still not quite as common, and Samsung's feature doesn't produce the same results. Zoom quality is the device's strong point. Thanks to the combination of 3 ultra-high-resolution camera modules and fusion algorithms, the result is good detail preservation from ultra-wide to long-range zooms. Overall, the Mate 50 Pro ranks second in zoom, behind the Honor Magic 4 Ultimate, which offers slightly better detail at mid-range zoom. For video, the Mate 50 Pro was tested at 4K and 30 FPS. With Vivid HDR mode enabled. Vivid HDR is a new HDR video format and is already supported by phones and some TVs. http://www.thuhuai.com/terminal-certify. Overall, the Mate 50 Pro wasn't quite as outstanding for video as it was for still photos and only ranked 7th, below its direct rivals the Google Pixel 7 Pro and the latest Apple iPhone. Exposure was the main strength in video, with accurate subject exposure and a wide dynamic range in bright light and indoors. However, the Huawei Mate 50 Pro lags somewhat behind the best in its class in terms of texture, noise compromise, especially in low light. Things look different for the outcome of the new France family use case. Here, the Mate 50 Pro scored 1 point higher than the Google Pixel 7 Pro and 2 points higher than the Apple iPhone 14 Pro. As mentioned above, the new adjustable aperture gave the Huawei phone a real advantage over the competition in group shots. Skin tones were mostly well rendered, but pink or orange shifts can become visible under certain conditions. Our testers also found the Mate 50 Pro less able to capture the decisive moment than some of its competitors, especially in low light. The Pixel 7 Pro was faster at taking a photo and better at avoiding motion blur. It's worth noting that the Mate 50 Pro does not come with the Leica imaging system found on the P50 Pro. Instead, it's equipped with Huawei's own Mate system, which allows the user to choose from 3 image display presets: Vivid, Bright and Original. Vivid increases contrast, Bright increases brightness while balancing exposure, and Original attempts to display colors in the same way the user's eyes see them. All our tests were performed in native mode. When tested in low light conditions, the Mate 50 Pro delivered sharp and completely natural details, as well as a very wide dynamic range, overall resulting in the best low light result we've seen yet. Image presentation was very balanced, with nice, vivid colors as well as nice contrast. It seems that Huawei engineers tried to introduce the mood of low light scenes by allowing a slightly warm color tint. In low light, the camera kept the aperture wide open at f/1.4 in order to capture as much light as possible. When using the telephoto zoom in low light, the Mate 50 Pro also manages to preserve more detail and keep noise levels lower than its competitors at most zoom settings. On the other hand, low-light video quality was lower than direct competitors, especially when compared to the iPhone 14 Pro. Texture artifacts and very strong noise were the most noticeable drawbacks when recording video in low-light conditions. About DxOMark camera tests. DxOMark camera evaluations are conducted in laboratories and in real-world situations using a variety of subjects. The results are based on objective tests, in which results are calculated directly by measurement software on our laboratory setup, and on perceptual tests, in which a sophisticated set of metrics allows a group of image experts to compare aspects of image quality that require human judgment. The smartphone testing involves a team of engineers and technicians for about a week. Image, zoom and video quality are scored separately and then combined into an overall score for comparison between cameras in different devices. For more information about the DxOMark camera protocol for recording and analysis, DxOMark engineers capture and evaluate more than 2,600 test images in controlled laboratory environments and in outdoor, indoor and low-light landscape scenes, using default camera settings. The photo protocol is designed with key use cases in mind and is based on typical photography scenarios, such as portraits, family and landscapes. Evaluation is performed by visually examining images against a reference of natural scenes, and by performing objective measurements on histogram images taken in the laboratory under various lighting conditions from 1 to 1000 plus lux and color temperatures from 2300 K to 6500 K. In photography, the Mate 50 Pro had the best overall score yet, thanks to excellent results in exposure, autofocus and texture, noise. Overall, it provided a very enjoyable display, even in challenging conditions like low light or high dynamic range scenes. Zoom is the third new usage score introduced with the DxOMark version 5 camera. It evaluates the camera's ability to capture detail at distances of less than 10 centimeters and zooms in as close as possible to 1:1. In macro mode, the Mate 50 Pro used the ultra-wide camera, with convincing results. Close-up shots tend to come with accurate exposure and nice color. Fine details were rendered much better than those on the Xiaomi 12s Ultra but lagged slightly behind the iPhone 14 Pro. Note that these samples were captured at the minimum focusing distance for each device, as shown below. The Mate 50 Pro and iPhone 14 Pro allow you to get much closer to Xiaomi. The Mate 50 Pro follows in the footsteps of previous Huawei devices and offers class-leading exposure. Target exposure tended to be accurate, and within the wide dynamic range provided good detail in both light and shadow areas of the frame. Compared to some of its main rivals, the Mate 50 Pro was also able to create nice contrast, but in strongly backlit scenes, this can come at the expense of a halo effect around the subject. The Mate 50 Pro achieved the highest score in our exposure database, better than the Honor Magic 4 Ultimate by 1 point. This was thanks to natural and pleasing contrast, as well as accurate subject exposure and wide dynamic range in low light. The Mate 50 Pro delivered beautiful colors and accurate white balance, especially when capturing low dynamic range scenes. However, The green tint under indoor conditions and blue tint in bright daylight means it can't quite match the color performance of the Apple iPhone 14 Pro and Google Pixel 7 Pro. Our testers also found that the skin tone rendering was a bit inaccurate in some cases, with too much saturation on lighter skin tones. The adjustable aperture is arguably the Mate 50 Pro's most important innovation. It allows the photographer to choose between an ultra-wide depth of field at f/4 or maximum light capture power at f/1.4. In the default photo mode, the camera never used apertures smaller than f/2.8. In this sample, the camera used f/2.8. which is enough to keep all subjects in focus, unlike the iPhone 14 Pro and Magic 4 Ultimate. To use f/4, Pro mode must be activated, which allows the user to manually select from 10 aperture settings. This offers much more flexibility in terms of depth of field than any other smartphone camera available today. In our tests, the Mate 50 Pro switched from f/2.0 to f/2.8 when it detected more than one person in the scene. In order to expand depth of field, this can be seen in the series of images below. In this way, for a single portrait, the limited depth of field of the f/2 aperture was used to create a soft bokeh effect and isolate the subject from the background. With more people in the scene, the priority shifted to keeping all subjects in focus, and I used the f/2.8 camera. In low light, this strategy changed, and the camera generally stuck to f/1.4 to allow maximum light to be captured. The Mate 50 Pro's autofocus system provided accurate focus and was very consistent in doing so. On the downside, it can be a little slow at times, which means missing the exact moment intended for capture, especially in high contrast situations. In this scene, the shutter was triggered at the moment the person kicked the ball. The Mate 50 Pro photo was taken a fraction of a second too late. The Pixel 7 Pro did a better job of capturing the right moment. In low dynamic range scenes, the Mate 50 Pro manages to capture images faster, offering real shutter lag, unlike some other flagship phones, such as the Xiaomi 12s Ultra or Samsung Galaxy S22 Ultra. In this graph, we see visual noise measurements from our lab in different light levels for the Mate 50 Pro and two competitors. On the Mate 50 Pro, noise was generally under control at all lighting levels. Huawei's noise reduction strategy remains unchanged from previous models. There was no noticeable subtle brightness noise in any conditions. This was very different from the Pixel 7 Pro, and especially the iPhone 14 Pro, as both allowed some subtle noise into their images. Noise is generally very well under control on the Huawei Mate 50 Pro. Only some spots of color noise are noticeable, resulting in pink areas in the image, especially in low light. The most common image effects were generally handled well by the Mate 50 Pro. However, the halos and color estimation around bright light in low light scenes were quite annoying. The Mate 50 Pro is the best device for bokeh we've tested yet. The high resolution depth map allowed precise isolation of the subject from the background. Foreground blur looked realistic too, and combined with the beautiful bright and light exposure, made it difficult to distinguish between the Mate 50 Pro's bokeh images and one taken with a DSLR and a large aperture lens. When looking at the image in detail, some minor depth estimation artifacts became visible, but the Huawei was better than most competitors in this regard. It was also clear that at default settings, Huawei applied much stronger blurring than the iPhone. In terms of on-screen image preview, the Mate 50 Pro showed an improvement over the P50 Pro, but it still couldn't match the iPhone 14 Pro, which managed to get a very similar image between preview and capture, especially in terms of exposure. The Mate 50 Pro delivered very high image quality across almost the entire zoom range. Target exposure was typically accurate, with a wide dynamic range. However, slight instability could be observed across a series of successive shots. In the zoom category, the Mate 50 Pro ranked second, behind the Honor Magic 4 Ultimate. The Mate 50 Pro comes with a 13mm equivalent ultra-wide camera, which offers a wide field of view as well as very good photo results with an overall pleasing display. Overall, the device manages to offer a high balance of texture and noise in relation to competitors, with noise-free display even in low light. Optical distortion is compensated very well. In close-up shooting, 40mm to 70mm, The Mate 50 Pro delivered an impressively natural rendering in the center of the frame, with good fine detail as well as a wide dynamic range and nice colors. However, there may be a loss of sharpness around the edges of the image, due to fusion algorithms. In mid-range telephoto shooting, focus issues became noticeable, and the level of detail was generally slightly lower than on the Honor Magic 4 Ultimate. However, the extremely low noise level continued to impress, regardless of the telezoom setting. Mate 50 Pro video tested at 4K and 30 FPS. This was the first test of the DxOMark camera in which Vivid HDR mode was activated. HDR formats have become more popular for both recording and viewing over the past few years. Apple has been using the Dolby Vision format since the iPhone 12 series. Some other manufacturers, for example, Samsung, support the HDR10 Plus format. Please note that YouTube only displays native HDR viewing if videos are watched on a compatible HDR display. Otherwise, compressed SDR video is displayed. The Mate 50 Pro did very well in video rendering, with accurate face exposure, fast and accurate exposure adaptation, and a wide dynamic range as seen below. The video frames below from the iPhone 14 Pro and Mate 50 Pro were created by converting the hardware's 10-bit video frames to 8-bit frames, using a uniform tone mapping curve, which more or less represents the perceived width of an HDR display. Note that the overall exposure of these images appears darker than when viewed on an HDR display, and that facial exposure is acceptable in both images. The iPhone 14 Pro generally has a slightly wider dynamic range, which allows for better light restoration in the scene below. Colors were nice and well balanced in all indoor and bright lighting conditions. White balance was generally accurate, too. In low light, some white balance shades were visible. In this clip, the green color was quite noticeable. Video autofocus was one of the major positive points of the Mate 50 Pro. The system managed to always keep the main subject in focus, and focus transitions were smooth in most cases. However, our testers noticed slightly abrupt transitions on some occasions, as is the case here. But globally, the results have been very convincing. Mate 50 Pro videos generally showed a high level of detail in most conditions. However, some texture effects can be quite annoying, especially in low light. This had a significant impact on the texture score of the video. The lack of consistency and sharpness when moving the device around while recording video was arguably one of the Mate 50 Pro's major drawbacks. The effect was most noticeable when walking during recording. Fairly long exposure times meant that motion blur occurred with every step the videographer took. Images recorded this way were stable, but vibrations caused by steps were noticeable in the footage. Overall, the Mate 50 Pro handled the most common video effects well, but some artifacts, including aliasing and ghosting, were still noticeable. Points were also deducted for the 30 FPS frame rate. Compared to other devices that offer 60 FPS, the Huawei Mate 50 Pro's videos were less smooth. This was especially noticeable when shooting panoramas. At the end of the video, I thank you for watching and I hope you liked it, and see you in a new video.